So, picture this. It's 1851, deep in the swamps of Alabama. A terrifying story is starting to whisper through the trees. A silent killer is out there, stalking the slave-owning South like a ghost that comes right out of the bayou. We're talking about a manhunt where everything got flipped completely upside down.
For 3 relentless weeks, this killer just systematically hunted his targets, and the final toll? 9 white men dead. We're talking patrollers, an overseer, even a plantation master. The sheer scale of it sent this wave of absolute terror rippling across the entire region.
The man responsible for all this, they only knew him as Wolf. But see, he wasn't born a killer. Not at all. He was an enslaved man named Jacob, and this is the incredible story of how an unimaginable loss forged him into a methodical predator who got his brutal and precise revenge on every single person who destroyed his world.
Okay, so to really get who the Wolf was, we've got to rewind about 6 months. We need to understand the man he was before all this. So let's go back to Thornwood Plantation, a place literally built on profit and pain, where a man named Jacob was just trying to survive day in and day out.
In this slide, wow, it just lays out the 2 completely different worlds that existed on this one plantation. You've got the master's world, where Cornelius Whitfield is living in his mansion, pulling in over 40 grand a year. And back then, that's like being a millionaire, easy. And then you have the slave's world, 147 people in dirt floor cabins, living under the constant threat of that whipping post, forced to pick 150 pounds of cotton every single day or face the consequences. It was a world of absolute power versus absolute submission.
Now Jacob, he was smart, a really skilled carpenter, which meant he could move around the plantation a bit. His whole strategy for survival was built on one thing, a mask. He made himself invisible. He wore this mask of submission, kept his eyes down, his voice quiet. He had to numb himself to any kind of emotional connection, because to survive, he had to believe he had nothing precious to lose.
And then, Sarah shows up. She could read, she was dignified, and she just had this strength that slavery hadn't managed to crush. When she and Jacob fell in love, it was, in itself, a huge act of resistance. But you have to understand, in a world like that, love isn't just a comfort, it's a liability. Her presence gave Jacob something precious to lose, and that was the most dangerous thing of all.
That little bit of humanity they carved out for themselves, a marriage, a baby on the way, well, it was all about to be just shattered. This is the breaking point. This is the series of events that would unleash the Wolf.
And what kicked it all off was something as horrific as it was, unfortunately, common. Master Whitfield, drunk and feeling entitled, tried to rape Sarah, who was 6 months pregnant, right there in the kitchen. When his wife, Constance, found them, her jealousy and rage weren't aimed at her husband. Oh no, it was all directed at Sarah. She demanded that Sarah be taught a lesson.
So that lesson she demanded? It was unbelievably brutal. The master ordered it, and the overseer, a man named Silas Cutcher, carried it out with a smile on his face. 50 lashes with a thick bullwhip. And they forced Jacob to stand right there and watch every single blow land on his pregnant wife's back.
And this timeline, it just shows you how fast everything fell apart. It's just devastating. On March 14th, you have the assault and the whipping. Just 3 days later, on the 17th, they lose their unborn son. The very next day, Sarah dies from her injuries. In the span of 4 days, Jacob's entire world was just gone.
And with her dying breath, she gives him his mission. Her last words to him were, "Don't let them forget I existed." This wasn't just a plea for him to remember her. This was a command. This was the promise that was going to transform a man into a force of vengeance. So in the dark of that empty cabin, the man Jacob, he died. The man who survived by being patient and submissive was just gone. And in his place, something else rose up. Something primal, focused, and completely without fear. The predator his mother had secretly named him at birth, Neshoba, Wolf.
This really breaks down that transformation perfectly, right? On one side, you have Jacob, who survived by just enduring. He believed in patience. He had everything in the world to lose. And on the other side, you have Wolf. He hunted with a strategy. He believed only in vengeance. And the most crucial part, he had absolutely nothing left to lose. And you gotta understand, this wasn't some wild, blind rampage. No, this was a military campaign. Wolf's plan was just chillingly methodical.
First, he vanished into the swamps he knew so well. Then, he hunted the 5 slave patrollers, picking them off one by one. Next up, the overseer, Kutcher. Then an ambush for the master, Whitfield. And finally, a silent infiltration of the main house for the mistress. He literally turned their own world and routines against them.
Now, in the end, Wolf was cornered and killed. But his story, oh, it didn't end with a bullet in a river, not by a long shot. His 3-week war created a legacy that would echo across the South for decades to come.
His rampage had this incredible two-sided effect. On the one hand, for the slave owners, he became this terrifying legend, a boogeyman in the swamps that proved their whole system was vulnerable. But on the other hand, for the enslaved people, he became a legend of resistance. He was living proof that a man could fight back, that the oppressors could be made to feel fear.
And hey, this wasn't just a scary story they told, it had real, measurable effects. I mean, just look at this chart. In the 3 years after his rampage, the number of documented escapes from Mobile County went up by a staggering 40%. The local slave patrol system was in shambles because men were literally too afraid to do the job anymore. His actions created a real path to freedom for other people.
And his story, it didn't just fade away. It spread like wildfire through every channel you can imagine. Abolitionist papers up north used it as proof of slavery's cruelty. The great Frederick Douglass would talk about the Alabama wolf in his speeches. And in the slave quarters, his story was woven into secret spirituals and passed down from one generation to the next. He became a symbol that was so much bigger than the swamps of Alabama.
Which brings us to the final, really tough question this whole story leaves us with. It's pulled right from the source material, and it's simple, but it's not easy. After watching your family be tortured and killed with zero hope for justice in the system that literally owns you, what would you have done? There are no easy answers here. There's only the reality of a man who was pushed so far beyond his breaking point that he chose to become the very monster his oppressors had always been afraid of.